Alright, good evening, my friends. This is Carpo, or Joshua, if you prefer. I have finally got this video figured out. After the first time I was on my roof, I started making it, and the neighbor's dog started barking, and so I got in my car here, and I got started to make this video again, and then thought, well, maybe the battery is not good, and it was dying. So here I am for a third attempt at making this video. And maybe it's the universe saying, hey, don't talk about this subject because it goes nowhere. But I'm going to anyway. You know, I should just get right into it. But I wanted to give kind of a preamble as to why I'm doing this video. First off, this is not a biased video. This is not a liberal video. This is not a conservative video. This is not a video that is going to try to pick on any one particular news organization or any one particular politician or group or persons, but I think that this is a subject that really needs to be covered right now, more than ever, which is, who do we trust? And a person could easily tie this into what's going on with fake news, which is probably why I'm talking about it, because anything that a person doesn't agree with has become fake news. Excuse me. So, the question is, you know, my mom and I were discussing this the other day, and she was like, well, how do you know what you're reading is true, and who you believe are right? And basically we were proposing this question to each other, and when I really thought about it, you know, I wanted to give a good answer as to why, you know, I believe the things that I believe, or at least to the degree that I believe them. Because first off, I want to say, it's difficult to believe anything 100%. It's very hard to be 100% sure about something that you haven't directly been influenced by or hasn't been in your life. And this is distant news stories, anything about another country, space, and there are plenty of people out there who will tell you that the earth is flat. And I won't get into that debate, of course. But to me, it really doesn't mean as much to try to prove any one point. And that's kind of where I'm coming from on this. If you truly do enough research to try to get a worldly view of what's going on around you, then you will be properly armed to make decisions, or at least develop your own theories or opinions about why things are the way they are, but more importantly, about what's true and when you're being fed bullshit. And you can't always trust your sources. You can't. And that's one of the hardest things to deal with. And, you know, to answer the question of who to trust, for me, I like to give myself a counter argument. Everything that I want to research, let's say I hear about this, give you an example. You know, years ago I was much more pliable in being sucked into conspiracy theories. And let's say I heard that something was causing cancer or killing people, and I would look into this particular food or substance, whatever it might be, and find all this research from all these, you know, alternative organizations talking about how dangerous it was. And then just for the hell of it, I started to Google against what I believed. And you start to find out that, oh, indeed, that these tests were flawed, or that the doctor was paid off. Dare I mention vaccines, because I'm not saying vaccines are safe. I'm saying that much of the original, the reason why the anti-vaxxer movement started was because of a doctor who had been proven to be bullshitting in order to gain profit. And that's the biggest thing, is that profit motive and profit incentive is what is behind so much of the bullshit that we hear. In fact, I would be willing to say 90 to 95% of the bullshit that we hear in the world is told to us in order to gain a profit. In other words, we hear bullshit from people we know, our friends, our family, who may tell us, you know, elaborate on a story that they had and make a vacation sound greater than it really was. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about full-blown stories that are put out there just to get views in order to get ad revenue, to make profit. And this is what's happening in the media right now. And it's not a pretty picture, but it's really been revealing for me to see why people think that certain things are fake and certain things are true. So I'm going to do my best to cover this topic in, say, 20, 25 minutes. And just have take a quick toke here. When I was, the answer, I guess, to give to the question my mom had, say, about how do I know how to trust my sources, it comes down to, you can't always trust your sources, but you can trust your insight, your instinct, and your gained wisdom, and the collective wisdom of all people, and that's key. Not only the things that you've learned, but what a majority of people believe, and that's not always true. But let's put it this way, if I can try to explain it. Just because a majority of people believe something doesn't mean it's true. But let's get to scientists. If a majority of scientists believe that global warming is real, and a percentage don't, you have to weigh those options as to whether you want to believe the 5% or less that don't, or believe that 95% of the people who dedicate their lives to understanding these environmental sciences conclusively agree on something. To me, it's not worth arguing, because I've come to my own conclusions, and it's very complicated. It's not that I just believe that humans have strictly caused global warming. It's a matter of, it's a very complicated issue. The Earth is on a cycle right now, but we have additionally pumped a little extra CO2. So I drive my own conclusions and don't fight to argue against people who don't believe it, because it doesn't seem that important to me, if that makes sense. But it's not very important for me to argue that point anymore, because I've had long discussions with people who are just not interested in facts and won't believe facts. And this brings us back to the idea of the video here, which is people not believing news, not believing media. And I'm not just talking about the conspiracy loonies like Alex Jones. This guy is the epitome of, not fake news, but propaganda to incite fear in order to sell his pills, his survival kits. Alex Jones is a smart guy. He's been doing this for a long time. Now, I've known Alex Jones from the beginning, not personally, of course, but I was commenting on his videos back when he personally would respond to things, and I had him get all upset at me one time and block him for asking a very, very calm question. I mean, I wasn't being offensive at all, but it was basically a question of, well, how are you sure that what you believe is right? And he blocked me. And here's another thing. This is back in the early YouTube days. I did the same thing with Mark Dice, and you may or may not know him. He's a Christian who's kind of a conspiracy buff, and I didn't know any better. I hadn't really heard a lot of his stuff, and I thought, a lot of it seems reasonable. And this is the problem. A lot of this is fact laced with fiction and speculation. And so I started questioning my sources, and I asked him, some personal questions, and this guy, who was supposedly this enlightened Christian truther guy, who I asked a few questions, he laid into me and called me all these horrible names. And this has happened to me before. One guy called me a fuckface, and this was a guy who was making videos about comparing the Nile River to, constellations in space, and he was really on the forefront of all these discoveries. And I just asked him a simple question, and he blocked me, emailed me. People are very hardcore. And I started asking myself, why are some of the people who believe the extreme things so hostile and violent and threatening towards others, while the people who are what you might call people who believe, not the mainstream, but what a majority of scientists believe, or the people who go with maybe a kind of common sense approach, why are they the ones who are considered the sheeple, the idiots? And I've done a lot of thinking about this, and I'm not new to the conspiracy realm. In 1998, I read Behold a Pale Horse, or I think it was before that, and that was by William Cooper. Now, William Cooper was supposedly an ex-military guy who revealed all these military secrets, government secrets, and I don't know how much of it's true and fake. It was a phenomenal book, interesting for a kid who was, 18, 19, and I was about for 10 years kind of hung up on this, telling people, have you heard? Oh, the Illuminati, the world's coming to an end, that they've planned to kill us all off, that they're going to collapse the economy, all the things that people are saying today. And this was back in almost 20 years ago. And so you can see why I'm kind of rubbed raw from that whole scene. You start to realize, well, if you're going to spend your life looking at everything like a conspiracy, it's a good excuse to not do anything because you figure everything's falling apart. But 20 years later, when you have a family and kids and you have to provide, you still have to be part of that system. And that's the conclusion I came to, is that I'm not going to try to resist the world I live in. I'm going to be like water and flow and take it all in and help it work for my advantage and the advantage of others around me. And that was the key to understanding why things are the way they are. But more importantly, why to believe certain people and not others. It's about the demeanor of those who are giving the information and the intention behind their demeanor. If they're just a person, if there are several people talking about a subject and they're really intense about it, then it might be an important subject. If there are several, quote, truther channels talking about a subject and they're giving you all the same info, repeating each other's words, and then there are several ads before it and after it and during the video, and you look and they're trying to sell you all kinds of things in the description, that's time to be wary. And people will say, well, you've got to feed your family, you've got to take care of yourself. Well, I've been making videos for 7 years, and I've never put ads on my channel, and I'm broke too. Everybody's got to make money, but just because you're providing something doesn't mean that it's true. And so I guess I'm getting a little sidetracked on the whole, truther movement, but a few questions to ask ourselves would be like, are there root truths to what a person's saying? In other words, is there some kind of, something that precedes it or predates it or explains why this would be happening? Are there any conclusions to make about it? In other words, can you ever come to the true answer about the problem that you're trying to figure out or the news story? And is it something that's likely to happen? Which doesn't always help, but for example, the Sandy Hook shootings and several other shootings. Now, a lot of people have said that they're crisis actors and the whole thing was staged. But then I've talked to people personally who had friends who were victims in it. One of my customers was telling me that they had something going on with a kidnapping or some sort of a hostage situation that somebody was involved with, they knew, and then I heard about it on the news, and then people were saying that was fake. And I'm like, well, I'm talking to people who are actually directly involved and affected by it, who are being delayed. But people don't want to believe anything that others are telling them. And that's how we got into the situation we're in. And that puts a situation where we are ripe to get screwed. And so let me tell you about the mainstream media. CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, they're totally biased, absolutely. And that's what pisses people off. But you know what? We need both right and left views in order to make this country work. It's always been that way. And I'm going to give you a little bit of info about why this happened. During the Reagan administration, he vetoed a bill where they would put into law the Fairness Doctrine. And this was from 1949, is when the Fairness Doctrine was basically drafted up. And what it was equal time for opposing views for media. And the idea was the Fairness Doctrine would allow the media, basically demand that the media give fair, equal time to both sides of a situation to allow the public to draw their own conclusions, which sounds fair at first. But a bunch of people, including the FCC, several businesses, and the media themselves, Reagan vetoed that bill to put it in as a permanent law because free speech overrode that. In other words, the media was saying, and it can't be Reagan who gets blamed for it totally, the media was saying, we want to be able to be biased, and we want to say what we want to say, and you can't make us be fair because we are a company. And honestly, that precedes that. I mean, if I was a judge, that would be a tough call. I would say I want to give people fair information, but on the other hand, if you're a business in a capitalist society, you should have the right to make as much as you want and do what you want. And that falls into some really interesting philosophical territory that I won't even get into right now. But so I started realizing that, these people are even less trusted than they were. I mean, like 25-30% of people trust media. The whole thing is, I don't trust the media either to tell me what's really going on. But it doesn't mean that I believe all the stories are fake. There's a real world out there, and people have taken it to the extent where they believe that things are not happening. I've talked to people who don't even believe the Middle East exists. They really have been told that it's a conspiracy, and I've delved into it, and they've actually gone into detail about how we've all been fooled that we're on one continent on a flat earth, that none of the other continents exist. And, at this point you say, well, I can't prove to you anything, and I wouldn't want to. It seems preposterous. But another question we have to ask ourselves is who we're listening to, are they informing us, or are they causing fear? And think about that for a minute. Is Alex Jones spewing a bunch of rhetoric and hate and screaming at the top of his lungs because he cares? Or is he doing that as a showman? And he's been interviewed where he said, it's a show. I play a part. He knows this, but his viewers don't. And here's the problem. The same thing happened with Fox News. Now, I saw Ted Koppel confront Fox News on a video clip, and he said, you guys, you ruined the media. Because he was asking Ted Koppel in an interview, like, what's happened? Why does nobody trust the media? And why are we all considered liars? And he was basically saying, because you guys have done it to yourself. You've spent years being biased and selfish and greedy. And I agree, the media has screwed itself. And that's one of the things I really agree with Trump with, that the media is bullshit. But when a president says that they're liars, that they're fake news, I've seen what this has done. It's caused so much damage. So many people have said that they believe that everything they see on TV is fake, because they're not smart enough to distinguish between fake and elaborated, exaggerated, or omitted, which is what happens a lot of the time. And the media, they don't want to talk bad about certain people. They don't want to talk bad about their own supporters. For example, left-wing liberal news would never talk bad about George Soros, but Fox News would talk shit about Soros all day, but they would never talk about the Koch brothers in a negative light. And I don't mean they never would, but each side berates the other conservative view of the same people, whether they're philanthropists or not. And it gets into a suspicious realm. People suspect the rich, no matter what. Excuse me. I found that people, they don't trust anybody with money. And to be honest, like I said, when I like to look at both sides of the issue, when it came to George Soros, I have really mixed feelings about that guy. But I'm going to tell you that I respect Warren Buffett as I probably respect him more than anybody who's a multi-billionaire. Him and Bill Gates, people don't realize that, regardless of what you believe, he has given up his fortune. He's one of a small group of people, of billionaires, who have agreed to give up large parts of their fortune in order to better the world. And I believe he's something like dedicated like 90% or something of his billions. He's $80 billion or something. And he's already given like $30 billion to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which have gone around the world helping kids with vaccines. You can look at the facts and the figures. They've cut child deaths down by malnutrition and by disease. They've actually made an impact. This small philanthropy group has had enough money to make an impact on the world. And a lot of people would say, well, I heard someone say that the vaccines are tainted. And I've heard even, seen interviews with them over there, and the people saying that that ISIS was telling the people over there that the vaccines are actually trying to get their kids sick. And there's so much misinfo spread around. And the question, we have to step back and go, wait a minute, none of us really know what's in a person's mind. But do we really think that Bill and Melinda Gates are mean, horrible people that want to hurt others? And if so, why? Is it just because they're rich? If you haven't looked into, Buffett and Gates and that whole situation, I urge you to do so. There's a lot of info on it, but for me, it just gives me a little hope that people aren't all selfish, greedy bastards. Having that kind of money is very difficult to manage, and I can't even imagine being in that situation. So, another thing that we can look at when we're looking at news to see if it's, is what kind of ads do they have and how many ads. Whether you're looking at a fake news site or not isn't the issue. It's a matter of whether the article matters, but everybody has to get ad revenue, and that's what's tough. It's one of the things, I get even asked on my channel on YouTube, people constantly send me these emails asking if I want to, sign up with their AdSense thing. Oh, they can make me money. They're always surprised when I tell them I don't do this for money. I do this, at least one of them was cool the other day. They're like, I said, well, I have a Patreon account. And they were like, I totally respect, that you don't want ads, because the corporate world has just screwed everything up. Everything's about buy. This. So, a little bit on the side there. So anyhow, the more we know about something, the more likely we are to think that we're right. And that means that when a person is really into a particular belief system or conspiracy, anything, then when they hear something that they agree with, they are going to go for it. And when they hear something that they don't agree with, it's instantly fake. And this is what they call confirmation bias. This is selective choice. So, a lot of people would fight and say, everything I believe is true. Fine. It's a cognitive dissonance within your own brain. You have to figure out why you think something that you don't really believe. Because none of us can be sure about anything 100%. I'm satisfied with knowing that my intellect, my reason, and my wisdom is enough to know to an extent when I'm being bullshitted. But it doesn't mean that I'm always right. But I try. And confirmation bias is a difficult thing for people to overcome. Something everybody needs to know about. And, it's a crazy world out there. The only thing I can trust is my own wisdom that I've gained through my years of experience. I'm 41. I'll be 42 this year, and I feel very young. I feel lucky. I feel more or less healthy. As healthy as you could feel at 40. But one thing I've realized as I get older is that if you don't work your mind out like a muscle, as they say, it is a muscle, use it or lose it. And if you're letting people spoon feed you information, whether it be the alt media or the regular media, it doesn't matter. You need to look at both sides. And this is funny because when I talk about mainstream media, hold on a sec. Had to take another toke. When I think about mainstream media, I haven't had cable in like 6 years or more. I hate commercials. I hate cable. My wife and I have loved not having to deal with commercials, but when it comes to the media, you have to ask yourself, where do we get our news? I never really liked the news, but watching the local news was just mostly garbage. So recently I asked myself, I haven't watched CNN in years. I haven't watched any mainstream media in years. And I asked myself, what's wrong with mainstream media to get the headlines? So what I do is, it's only fair, since I say I like to look at things from both sides, to look at the mainstream media too, and the alternate media. And so there is one place that I've found that is rather reasonable to get at least the headlines of what's going on, and that's Associated Press. For those who don't know, I won't give you the details of AP, but everybody's heard the term AP, and they are they're basically news whores. They sell out, or news pimps maybe. They do the most reporting of any news agency around the world, and they sell their information to various news organizations to use, whether it be clips, videos. If you go to the AP website, you can find all the headlines that everybody else is using. And it's important to look through them because these are people who are around the world instantly connected, and we're not. So no matter how much you think something is fake, remember that you live in your house. You're not out there. You don't have people in the field. And I'll honestly say that most of the media today is garbage. They don't have anyone in the field. They're not journalists. They are sensationalists. They are actors. Everyone on Fox News is like that, and that's what's happened to MSNBC, ABC. All the different channels have turned into garbage, and it was after 9/11 that they started throwing up all the banners and shit. I mean, that wasn't there before. And I'll tell you, there was a time, and it was kind of before my time, but when Walter Kronkite was in there, news was good. He was considered one of the most respected people, and at one time he was considered the most trusted person in the country. And that's amazing today because it's dropped to an all-time low. So if you are in media or involved in any of those, I would urge that you kind of nudge your companies towards putting out something that people care about, because in the next generation, mainstream media is going to go by the wayside, and that means that all of us are going to have to be involved. We're all going to have to be part of it. It doesn't mean that we have to take sides. You really don't. If you're a conservative, if you're a liberal, just stop being so petty about silly things. I mean, I can see why we're arguing. If you really believe that, gays shouldn't have rights, then, you're a dick. It's none of your fucking business what gays should be doing. Or, if you want to make drugs illegal, you're a douchebag too. Stay out of my life. Because when it comes to personal freedoms and less government, which is what the right always wants to stand for, it means that, we all get the choice to do what we want as individuals. And that's very difficult to accomplish. And some want this trickle-down economy, the Reagan trickle-down economics, meaning, give tax cuts to the big companies and then it'll create more jobs. And it didn't work in the 80s. And now they're doing it again. And it doesn't work today. So we're in a very interesting situation where nobody wants you to believe that anything's true. And there are a lot of legitimate news reporters out there trying to give you the info as well as they know it. And no, you won't know 100%. You can't know for sure. That's where your wisdom has to kick in. And you have to be wise and worldly and pay attention. Because if we don't, then we will be living in Orwell's 1984. Because we're basically there already. And this is Animal Farm at its best. And we don't even realize it's happening. We're fighting amongst each other. And, you know where I'm going with that. So I'll talk to y'all later. Have a wonderful evening.